Just kidding.
Okay, I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:32. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Today's going to be Councilman Brundrett.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We're on agenda item number 3. We have a presentation from the Rockport Police Department 2022 annual report. I believe that is you, Chief Stevens.
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, you have what is our 2022 annual report. The department hasn't put out an annual report in some time, and so this is really kind of a first iteration of this for a few years. As soon as we're done here, we'll actually hang this annual report on our website so that the public can access it more easily. You have the full report in front of you, and if I could I just made a couple of slides to hit some of the high points on it. And really this is our opportunity. Again, and as I put on the cover sheet, like in any city, public safety eats the lion's share of the budget. And I think it certainly behooves us to show you all, other city staff, as well as our citizens, what are we doing with all of that money? We do spend a lot of money, and so we want to report out what we did over the last 12 months with that amount of budget. We operate on a little over $5 million in our operating budget alone, and so just some high points of that. Again, you have the full report to read. We took about 8,900 calls for service. Over half of those were two officer calls for service. Required at least 2 officers to respond to. More than 1,500 of those calls where we generated a report. So you can look at those numbers. We take a lot of calls where we advise the public, where we answer disturbances, different things like that. And about a little more than 1,500 of those, we actually generated either an offense report, an incident report, wrote a crash report, whatever it may be. And the graph that you have up here, the vast majority of the calls, and again, we could break these down into individual types of calls. We wanted to be pretty general in this, and as we do these reports going forward, we'll probably have more detailed information, but 850 of those we'll categorize as disturbances. It could be between neighbors. A great deal of these are within the home, or we refer to as family violence reports, things like that. The 2 big categories, which our biggest crime issue, of course, in Rockport is property crimes, and 690 were burglary and theft calls, 314 of which generated an offense report. Property crime is our big issue here, and I'm gonna get to where we sit on violent crime here in just a second. Of note, I want to point out 924 alarm calls that we had. The vast majority of which, all but 4 of those, were false alarms. So out of that 924 calls, there were false alarms, save for 4, and of those 4, I think only 1 or 2 were actual burglaries. The other couple of them, something happened which generated an actual good alarm where we wrote reports about that. You are aware, and we've put a lot of social media out of how we are, I'm going to use the word finally, enforcing Rockport's alarm ordinance. It's an ordinance that's been on the books for many, many years. We're taking a very gradual approach with that. We're not out writing tickets, fining people as of yet. Our first step was public education. We really put a lot of information out. We're at that process now where if you have an unpermitted alarm, we go to that, but then we discontinue service, but we do communicate with the alarm holder to encourage them to come in, get permitted, primarily so we know who the key holder is, so that if we find a problem, we can contact somebody there. We've had a great response, an overwhelmingly great response to people coming in and getting permitted. And our big goal is to reduce those false alarms, because you can see how much budget money that takes up. between manpower, fuel, equipment, wear and tear on vehicles, things like that. It's a big thing that we're looking at. I'll move on to our CID. We had 1,589 cases assigned. 8 of those are what we would consider serious crimes in Rockport, Texas, over the course of 2022. In a moment, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth on those. One thing that's not in here that I do want to point out again, so I think what the public, what I believe they want to know whenever you talk about crime statistics, because we had a letter to the editor not long ago that categorized Rockport, Texas as a more dangerous city than Houston. I think that's absurd. That's not really the case. But if you go to different websites, when you have raw data that's not finally analyzed like what we've done, what we do every year actually, and why it's important to have this annual report, raw data could make you believe that. But common sense tells you that simply cannot be the case. And I'll talk about those 8 serious crimes. And those would include murder, robbery, rape, and a variety of sex-related crimes, sexual assault, sex crimes against children, things like that. And we had 8 of those. And actually, since I've generated this report, we have to add one to that. And for the first time in many years, we are going to have, in 2022, a crime that is categorized as either murder or a non-negligent homicide. And in this case, it'll be manslaughter. So we virtually never have one. And for many years, Rockport's not had a murder or a non-negligent homicide. But in 2022, we'll take a stat for that. If you recall, in August, we had an overdose at some apartments here in the city. And through our investigators, were able to determine after the autopsy results came back, that young girl, 17-year-old girl, had overdosed on fentanyl. If you recall some of the stuff that I brought before the council, we had a great drug investigation where we went all the way to Corpus Christi, found out where a lot of drugs were coming into Rockport, and our detectives were able to definitively link the fentanyl that she took and she was provided to 2 suspects that gave her that in the city limits of Rockport, and they have, since this was produced, been indicted for manslaughter. So she's a victim of manslaughter, and we take that as a statistic. Now, one could argue that, well, that makes us a very dangerous city. I'm going to disagree with that in terms of overall victimization, things like that. In all of these 8 serious crimes, plus this one that I'm adding to it, the victims and the suspects knew each other. Now, I don't want to take away from that. These are all tragedies. These are all terrible crimes. Nonetheless, this young lady knew these 2 individuals, and they were participating in this activity together. Nonetheless, they giving her this drug constituted manslaughter, and we went forward filing that case, and they've been indicted for that. I'll talk a little bit more, again, momentarily about those other 8 crimes. I think what's important to me to answer in this annual report and to the Rockport citizens and to people that visit, and what I think an American citizen wants to know, is what are my chances of being a victim of a random act of violence in my home or when I visit a place like Rockport. And these numbers, analyzed like this rather than raw data, they show definitively it's almost non-existent. We can't say that it could never happen. Anywhere, read the news, anywhere you could become a victim of a mass shooting. You could become a victim of any kind of violent crime. But your chances of it in Rockport, Texas, of being a victim of a random act of violence committed by a stranger are so negligible, and these numbers show that. So the idea that we're more dangerous than Houston is just simply absurd, and these numbers show that. I'll move on, make a couple of other points, and then I want to make sure I have some time to answer questions for you. In our property room, that's a big thing. As you guys know, we're a recognized agency by the Texas Police Chiefs Association. We're accredited, and one of the big things that we have to really keep for our legitimacy and for that certification is how we maintain evidence and property. Few people realize what a daunting task that is. During 2022, We took in 780 items of property, evidence, found property, things like that. We disposed of, either auctioned or destroyed, 652 items of property. And on December 31st of 2022, we had in our custody 2,892 different items of property. It's a daunting task, and we randomly inspect that through sampling, and then once a year, we inventory all 2,892 items and make sure they are all accounted for. If you came to me and said, where's this item? Where's this nameplate? I can show it to you. I can pull it out and I can show it to you. It's a big deal. Our grant summaries, later on, well, momentarily, you'll see, I think it's on the consent agenda. We operate off of two great grants that focus on immigration. There's a Stone Garden and Border Star grant, and then Border Star is on the agenda for tonight. The one is a federal grant, the other is a state grant. In 2022, 2,000 vehicle stops were conducted by officers working those grants. 36 illegal aliens were detained by Rockport police officers, turned over to Border Patrol. We are on a thoroughfare between the Valley and Houston. Crime, we have low crime in Rockport, but crime passes through Rockport, and we try to address it by use of those, and you can see that graph right there. I'll touch on codes really quick. That's one of the big things in there. 887 cases regarding properties out of compliance. They cleared 577 of those cases. Since codes has been moved under the police department, we've really been all gas, no brake, doing our best to make sure that people are keeping their properties in compliance with the city's codes, but we're also taking an approach to understand people's circumstances, where they are, trying to meet them where they are, and take a very balanced approach to that. You have a lot of information there about codes. And real quick, and I think if we roll up the slides a little bit. So this right here is a graph that I keep, that our folks keep monthly and that I look at monthly, and this is what helps me know kind of where we are. Every time we get crime reported into us, we analyze these numbers, and we keep this basically in two months in arrears. So the reason that I give it until the end of February to report this out is so that if we mark down a sexual assault, someone reports that to us, we give that a couple of months to make sure the validity of that crime. Same thing with an aggravated assault or a car burglary or whatever else, so that these numbers are as accurate as they can be. A great example is here very recently, a lady called up and said, my cell phone was stolen. It was, and this is the trouble with crime stats and their accuracy. And she said, I laid it down on the counter at Walmart and I came back in and someone has obviously picked it up and stolen it. Fair enough, we write a report. That's a crime that we take as the city of Rockport. We watch the videos and that's not actually what happened. And she's not making a false report. She remembers that has to be what happened. Actually, we watch the videos and she never sets her phone down. That doesn't happen. What happens is she's walking with the shopping cart through the parking lot and it falls off and it lands in the parking lot and she doesn't realize it and moves on. About an hour or so later, a couple of young people find the phone, pick it up, look at it, and they leave. Well, what if that was a $5 bill? Sort of finders keepers. Is that a crime or is that not a crime? So we have to make a judgment call on, did a theft occur or did somebody find a phone? So that's how we look at these stats, and we have to decide, well, are we going to take that? I can tell you in that case there, phone's a very valuable item, and they probably should turn it in. And so in the idea of making sure that we don't undercount our crime, we're going to take that as a crime. Had it been a $100 bill floating off, we wouldn't take that. Now, how do you balance that? It's up to us as the police department to try to give the most accurate data that we can give, right? So we wait a couple of months so that we get that. On this graph, you can see that I've already gone back and put a 1 for murder. It's actually murder or non-negligent homicide in August of 2022. If you look down at the other, if we go down one more slide, you can see where I've circled in red. So the 8 serious crimes, we had 6 sex offenses. In each one of those, the victim and the suspect knew each other. 4 of those occurred inside the home. 2 of those were were relationships where there was already an existing knowledge between the two. And again, these are serious crimes, and I don't at all detract from them. But I think the question that a citizen has whenever I say that there were 6 sex-related offenses, 6 sexual assaults in Rockport, Texas, it makes us think, am I going to go out to dinner and some random criminal is going to attack me and rape me? Do we have 6 rapes in Rockport, Texas committed by we do not. We had none of that occurred. And so it's important to say these are serious crimes and they're terrible crimes, but they're not random acts of violence, if that makes sense. We had 2 robberies, one of which, if you recall last year when we had a string of car burglaries and several guns were taken, the band of crooks, one of them wanted more of the loot for themselves and used one of the stolen guns to hold the others up and took more of their share of the loot. So again, that's serious, I think. It's a very serious crime. However, it doesn't speak to how dangerous it is for these citizens walking around in the evening time walking their dog in Rockport, Texas, whether or not they're going to be robbed at gunpoint. So, one more point on the crime stats. 83 of our property crimes, car burglaries, things like that, is property left unsecured. And Mayor J-Rowe, I've heard him tell this story a number of times. A city like Rockport, this is what really kind of plagues us, is some folks out of San Antonio drive into town, they get in late, and they've got their boat with fishing poles, cooler full of beer, some electronics, whatever, and they get in, they pull into the motel, and they're from a big city, but they're coming to Rockport, should be safe, and they go in and go to sleep. Some people from Houston that are less savory pull into the same motel and go, hey, look at this, and they grab all that stuff. So they report it to us, and now we have a crime that occurred amongst people that don't live here, that aren't from here, but that crime impacts our crime stats. And the suspect nor the victim are from Rockport, Texas. But we're a tourist community, and during the 4th of July, Oyster Fest, here coming up this weekend, we're probably going to have some issues, probably have a fist fight or two, and it won't be Rockport citizens, but we take those crime stats. All those things are stuff to keep in mind as we do our crime reporting. That's my Reader's Digest version, fast and furious, on the first annual report that we've put out in some time. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have for me.
What's our clearance rate as far as, maybe not convictions, but just clearance of the cases?
I don't know if it's on my slide actually, but it may be deeper in the report. Those are all ones assigned. It's here, I'll tell you.
You don't have exact number. We doing good? We
do exceptionally well, and in fact, when we have these string of car burglaries, I'm not used to solving those. I came from a city where somebody breaks in your car, forget about it. We're not going to know that. And I came in one day, and the 2 commanders, they said, "Hey, we caught those car burglars from last weekend." I thought, "Wait, you what? Are you kidding?" And so it's really common, and of whatever type of crime, certainly of the violent crimes, we are able to solve those crimes quickly, and we've had great success. Do we solve them all? Certainly not. We have a very high clearance rate, and I'm really proud of the efforts that our folks come into that. And I'll tell you, because the attitude that we've got, we're very mission driven. I try to keep our folks focused on the things that we're there to do, and if it's not contributing to that, let's not do that. Let's focus, stay mission focused.
Thank you, sir. One other thing, as far as our petty crimes, thefts and I guess drug paraphernalia, is it repeat? And we've seen the same customers?
By and large, we do. I also see though that that people come in from out of town. Again, it's what I spoke about a minute ago, because they perceive that folks here have something to steal. And so every now and then we'll get a band of people come through, and they'll hit here, and a little bit later, same MO will hit in Port Lavaca, will hit up the coast, things like that. So those are much tougher to solve, but we do see some of that. But by and large, we do have a lot of repeat offenders. A few knuckleheads making life hard for everyday folks.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief. I guess you guys can stay up there, because on agenda item number 4, we have another presentation from the Rockport Police Department, New in Blue program.
And so this is an effort. We were faced with the fact that our ticket writing system was we have electronic handheld ticket writers that whenever the officer goes on a traffic stop, they come up, they've got your information, they punch it in, and whether they do warnings or they write a ticket, and they're really effective, but they grew old and we had to replace them. And so we were looking for a cost-effective measure to do that. The hardware is actually real expensive, and so as we shopped around, we looked at what's out on the market, and everything is, a lot of stuff in business and life is app platforms. And so New in Blue is an app. Every officer has been issued a cell phone, a city cell phone, for some time, because a lot of our calls we take over the phone. Someone visits Rockport, gets back home to Austin or wherever, needs to file a police report, the officer takes. So a lot of reasons they've had city cell phones for some time. The app is loaded on their cell phone, and so when an officer makes a stop, this was a great platform. We tried it out. It really had a lot of value. We don't have to buy any hardware other than the printers, which are pretty affordable. It's by the time the initial fee is done, it costs about, I have the numbers in here, I can't remember, but by and large, it's I'll say substantially cheaper. I can look deeper to get you that, but you guys approved it last budget year, so you've got those numbers. And so here's the reason I wanted to present this. City manager and I were talking about it. I was showing it to her, and she said, the council, this would be good to present to you guys, because here's one of the greatest facets of this is after the officer has finished interacting with the citizen, not just on a traffic stop, the platform loads in field interview cards when we just make a citizen contact, when we work a crash and we do an information exchange, we do any number of things that we do. We've loaded a bunch of our forms onto it. A few minutes after I leave you, because I take your phone number down, you get a text, and it basically says, how was your interaction with the Rockport Police Department? And it's something that we've kind of looked for a way to get direct feedback. We have a few indirect ways, but I wanted direct feedback, and this has really given us this great opportunity. And it's not just asking, how was your interaction with the Rockport Police Department? It asks you, how safe do you feel living in Rockport, Texas? It asks a number of questions, and those are, if you look a couple pages back in your packet, it's got the list of questions that each person asks. We're at about a 19% response rate, and I think that that Bob was going to pull up the website, and I was going to log onto it. If we can do that. Did we put a link on there for? We took it off. Well, you have a not in real time deal in your one in your packet that shows, and I printed this out on February 15th, that you can read through, and it's basically it's like you're giving us a review on Yelp. You have 1 to 5 stars. So this, but real quick, Bob or Kimberly, this is the dashboard that I can look at, or any of the supervisors can pull up. It lets me know everything from the demographics of the people that we're interacting with, whether there's warnings, citations, verbal warnings, whatever they put into the system. It tracks our racial profiling stats. It also shows a map of where we're having stops, things like that. And if you scroll down a little bit more, and if you've got this in your packet, a little bit more down to these next pages, I just printed out on February 15th what the feedback was that we were getting. Right now, we're a 4-star agency according to the people we're interacting with on traffic stops or on citizen contacts. We've got some 1 stars. There was one fella that did not appreciate having his car towed. Of course, he didn't have any insurance or a driver's license, so it is what it is. I say that in jest, but perhaps we could have been more professional. Perhaps we could have been more polite, and that's something for us to take on and review. He wasn't very constructive in his comments, but it is something for us to look at. And if that officer continues to get 1, 2 stars and things, that's a chance for me to go to that officer and say, maybe your attitude is part of the problem. Maybe you need to adjust the way you're interacting with the public. We do tow cars sometimes. We do arrest. We do write tickets, but we don't have to leave a bad taste in people's mouth when we do that. Because you can look on here where people get tickets, and there's people that give us 5 stars even after they've received a ticket. The type of law enforcement officer every community should have, and even though they gave me a ticket, I deserved a ticket. There's some great comments on there, and that's the kind of feedback that we need to hear. Be honest with you, I like the positive feedback. That's great to know that the officers are doing a great job, but I really want to be able to look through here and find opportunities for improvement where the officers are doing a good job, but perhaps their attitude, their demeanor, whatever it is, could use some improvement. And then you see on here some of the questions they're asking, which are really good for us as a city overall. How safe do you feel living in Rockport? It asks questions such as, the police presence in my neighborhood is appropriate for the need. Traffic enforcement meets the needs of the community. I feel safe in shopping in Rockport. There's questions about visitors. The officer showed compassion or concern. There's an array of questions, and again, we're at about a 19% response rate. So far, it's a really good program. City manager and I felt like that'd be something that you guys could look at. It's an opportunity for us to get real-time and direct feedback from typically, if we're with you, it's not your best day. And so it gives us a really objective look at how we're performing and how the city is doing overall. Any questions I can answer for you on that?
Any questions or comments? All right, thank you, Chief.
You bet. Thank you.
Agenda item number 5, citizens to be heard. At this time, comments limited to 3 minutes will be taken from the audience from persons who have signed the speaker's cards located on the table in the back of the training room of the Service Center and delivered to the City Secretary before the meeting begins, or written comments received by 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting on any agenda item or any subject matter will be read and summarized in the minutes of the meeting. Persons wishing to address the council and who have registered using the citizen participation form will have up to 3 minutes to speak. In accordance with the Open Meetings Act, council may not discuss or take action on any item that has not been posted on the agenda. While civic public criticism is not prohibited, disorderly conduct or disturbance of the peace as prohibited by law shall be cause for the chair to determine the offender's time to speak. We have 2 cards that were placed in front of me tonight. Number 1 is going to be Jeff Hutt, if you want to come up and speak.
Jeff Hutt, 2201 Prairie Road. This time is also for agenda items too, right? Y'all don't say that when you go into it. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't separate the time. I'd like to a couple of questions of inquiry. Mr. J. Rowe is our mayor. His information is not on we cannot see it on the tax rolls. I believe this is because he was in law enforcement, but I got up here, my address is 2201 Prairie Road. As a member of the public who addresses the council, I'm always asked to give you my address. I think it's only fair that Mr. J. Rowe allow the taxpayers to see what his appraised value is and what he's been paying in taxes, considering he raises our taxes. My second thing is, last week at the 100 Club meeting, Police Chief Stevens showed up and he pontificated for a long time on the need for cameras. And at that time, he also sent out a petition asking for the support of members of that club to sign up in support. And I want to know if this was approved by council or by the city manager, and what authority you have. My last one is the whole idea of a tax incentive. You know, Texas is the largest growing state right now. Everybody who's had tax incentives or these things, they're not in with it. They understand we have a background, we can see what happens. The promise that we've been sold with these type of initiatives, they've never worked out. I know there's a lot of pressure on you guys as council, and that's unfortunate to push through these things. You know, if you would make a ordinance that says the only tax incentives or tax financing things that we would issue would have to be approved by the voters at an election, it would spread it would spread it out, because really we all have to suffer the consequences of a tax incentive or these, we all pay in the short term. And this would take the responsibility off your backs, and it would get a good, the people could vote for it. And also lastly, so right now we're into day 7 or day 8 of the siege of the Alamo. And as as a good Texans, that we should remember that at one time there's 109 people, that not including their wives and their children, black, brown, and white, they all stood together because they were they decided we're not going to let tyranny, we're not going to let people run our lives and ruin our lives. And I really see this pretty much as a tyrannous government that we have. We're looking for you guys to be that person for us. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Christy Rutledge.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Christy Rutledge, 1411 Dana Drive. I want to thank Jeff Hutt for his constructive comments. I think he gave you all some really good ideas. I want to speak on several items tonight. It's no secret that there's been quite a bit of debate about the elimination of citizens to be heard on agenda items. The last city council meeting, I attended every single Charter Review Commission meeting. I spent a lot of time. There was a lot of debate in those meetings over when citizens would get to be heard. There was an amendment that was approved by the Charter Review Commission to guarantee the citizens' right to speak on each agenda item, as it had been previously, as it is currently listed under our Code of Ordinance, Section 231. Over the last 3 city council meetings, this is the 3rd one, this has been the topic of citizens to be heard. On January 31st, Mr. Brundrett asked about it, and the city attorney gave incorrect information. Then he was asked to look it up, and he was trying to look it up, and he was interrupted. So you didn't get a complete answer from your city attorney. I don't know what happened with that. Last week, it was put through on the consent agenda, so that, again, there was no discussion about that. I don't know why you deleted the citizens' comments in the city council, but it's an opportunity to bridge a gap that we've had for too long. And I don't know why we're going backwards on this. You have a Code of Ordinance, Section 231. You're in violation of it tonight. You're in violation of it every city council meeting. Somehow the procedures have been changed, and I'm asking you to pull last week's, from the consent agenda, the meeting minutes, because Patrick Kane came and explained clearly, and I followed up with a handout, and I also explained from my perspective how the Code of Ordinance is being violated. Our meeting records, your meeting records for in tonight's agenda packet on the consent agenda do not reflect any concern from citizen whatsoever. So I'm asking you to pull the meeting minutes, and I'm asking that they be amended to reflect accurately our statements. Because all it says in here, if someone were to read the meeting minutes, all it says in here is that somebody spoke on it. on citizen comments. It doesn't say that there was opposition and that you're in violation of the charter. Now, I'm running out of time. I have 2 other agenda items I've signed up for, and I don't get to speak on them because there's no more time. So this is a very good example of the problems that are created.
Mrs. Rutledge, I will allow you to speak on agenda number 14, 15 when they do come up on call.
When they come up?
Mhm.
Thank you.
We're going to go to the consent agenda. All consent agenda items listed are considered to be routine by the City Council and enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Now, there is a consent agenda I do have to read out loud tonight, which is item number 9, which is deliberate and act on a second and final reading of proposed ordinance authorizing a pro rata reimbursement to Eric and Janet Prime, Michael E. and Cynthia S. Gleek, Gary and Linda A. Newman, Ebert I. Thomas and Scott Johnson for development of a sanitary sewer main utility line affecting the property and property owners along Ocean Drive, known as Aransas County Appraisal District Property ID numbers 64666, 64667, and 65356, Rockport, Aransas County, Texas, providing for pro rata payments from benefit property owners who request to connect to the sewer utilities during the reimbursement period, providing for developer to be reimbursed from pro rata funds received, and providing an effective date and a termination date. Would any of you council members like to take any of these consent items off, or would you have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
A second.
Okay. Ward 1,
Aye.
Ward 2,
Aye.
Ward 3,
Aye.
Ward 4, aye. We will now go to a public hearing. Number 12, conduct a public hearing for the purpose of considering abolishing, continuance, or modification of the juvenile curfew ordinance. I believe this is you again, Chief.
Open, give it time.
Oh, public hearing, sorry. Time is 7:09.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council, thank you. The City of Rockport has had the juvenile curfew ordinance, I believe it was first enacted in 2001. It's required by law to be reviewed every 3 years to either modify it, to abolish it, or to continue it. That's been done throughout the years. Occasionally it's expired inadvertently, but it's been renewed ultimately throughout the time since 2001. It was last renewed in March of 2020, so here we are again at that 3-year mark, and it's time to review this ordinance to determine whether or not it needs to be modified, continued, or done away with. Made a few slides for you. Ultimately, it's the school district police department that utilizes this ordinance the most. They write the vast majority of citations, and that's what's on that first graph or that first chart that you see. We do write a handful of citations, and this is a chart over the last 3 years. The vast majority, and I think everybody always looks at this as it being a nighttime curfew. It is. However, the majority of these citations where it's most effective is during the day. The curfew applies when school's in session. Kids either have to be in school or they got to be at home. And so you can see from that next chart, the vast majority of the citations are issued during the day. And then finally, what I had Lee pull up, basically to really look at whether or not this is worthwhile or whether we need to continue it, is the number of calls that we have that involve juveniles, and they have continued to rise over the course of the last 5 years. There's a total of 381. You can see the numbers there. I'm sorry that they're so small. Basically 51 calls in 2018, 68 in 19, 86, 85, and 91 calls in 2022. Looking at that, considering how valuable and how much the school district needs that ordinance, it is my recommendation that we continue it as it's written. I don't see any need to modify it. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions, or do we have anyone from the audience that would like to speak on this?
I grew up in Rockport without one, so did you, and so did you, and I didn't think it was a problem. It seems to me that over the last 5 years, this ordinance has not decreased the amount of juveniles issuing tickets. If anything, it's accelerating it. I mean, why don't we have some faith in our parents and have some faith in our kids? And why don't we just abolish this and see if the school, give it 2 years, see if the school shows a higher number of absentees, since they're the only ones doing it, and they're not even here telling you guys to do it. So could we see if the school, I mean, if we don't see an increase in the next whatever years, we know that this isn't working and we can do without it. But we've done it for so long, now it's just become a root of habit. I'd say please vote against it.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? Okay. Thank you, Chief. And I see public hearing is now closed at 7:13 p.m. We're going to the regular agenda. We have agenda item number 13, deliberate and act on first reading of an ordinance continuing the City of Rockport Code of Ordinance Chapter 66, Offenses and Miscellaneous Provisions, Article 2, Minors Curfew, setting curfew hours for minors, repealing all sections in conflict herewith, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date.
So Mayor and Council, it does require, it's an ordinance that requires a first reading and then a second reading if we are to continue it. You have the numbers that I've shown you there. Typically, whenever this is used, it's because parents have failed to keep their children either in their own care or whatever. They're not parenting them. That's whenever the police step in and exercise this ordinance. It's not used every time we come across a juvenile that's outside of curfew. So with that, again, I'll answer any questions I can with you.
Council, any questions or a motion?
I'd say we had a chance to visit with the school district police chief, and he provide his support as well.
He does. I talk with him on a regular basis. This has come up. I've talked with him before. I think that course of habit, it's always the local police that ends up coming up and presenting this for you. I wouldn't dispute the fact that they certainly can come up and provide you with their recommendation or whatnot, but it's a city ordinance, and it's you're the elected body that enacts it, and I am the police representative to you. Nonetheless, if you would like for them to come here before a second reading or at a later time to look at this, I don't think that they would mind at all coming in and presenting to you.
I don't know that the presentation is necessary. I just wanted to assure that you've communicated with him, which I figured you had.
Absolutely.
I sit on the School Safety and Security Committee. I know we've got a meeting coming up, but I don't know if that's going to align before our second reading. So I'm good with what you've presented. I appreciate it. I see in here that the original ordinance was passed in 2001. I suspect that there was an ordinance that preceded that as well, because I remember curfew when I was a youngster. I'm sure Brad and I did our best to violate it as best we could. But so I don't think 2001 is the original date, probably for this version, but I think there's been a longstanding similar type ordinance in this community as long as I can remember.
I can tell you that from experience as a young patrolman all the way back is that the teeth in it is really, it's not necessarily, the kids are not afraid of the ticket at all. It's the parents that are afraid of getting the ticket, and that is what, in my experience, compels the parent to tell the kid, get in the house, it's time to come in, and that's where the real teeth of it is because the parent themselves are afraid to get the curfew ticket. It's not really the kids, the parent. That's where it's got the most impact.
Yeah. It's a tool. It's one of the tools that are available, and clearly the school district is utilizing it, as your statistics show. Thank you.
Correctly. Our issues were during the daytime, as your statistics show, whenever we were growing up in school.
that it was, majority of the time that ordinance was used, and this is prior to 2001, so I do remember some kind of curfew ordinance, but it was, I don't ever remember ever hearing anybody getting a curfew ticket for after hours. It was usually during school. So that's what I remember.
Okay, do we have a motion? Anyone else? I make a motion to approve agenda item 13 as presented.
I'll second.
Okay. Ward 1,
Aye.
Ward 2,
Aye.
Ward 3,
Aye.
Ward 4, aye. Motion passes. We have agenda item number 14, hear and deliberate on presentation from Travis James of TXP on downtown tax increment reinvestment zone. We do have a citizen to be heard, Ms. Christy Rutledge, if you want to come speak beforehand.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem, for allowing me to speak on this item. Christy Rutledge, 1411 Dana Drive. I just want to say there was nothing in the agenda packet tonight, so I'm not really sure what's going to be in the presentation. I have followed the tax incentive policies since they were announced and developed by the Economic Development Corporation. I read all of them, especially studied the TIF policy, which this is the TIF/tiers. So I'm very interested in what might be going on here. I've also studied the American Planning Association Downtown Resiliency and all of the objectives in the back. And the tiers could have a very negative effect on the affordability, the rents. There was a note in the American Planning Association document, the rents for the small arts in downtown could be negatively affected, could really hurt those properties. So my encouragement to City Council is to adopt an open policy with everyone, because you've taken on a lot of debt in the last few years, and every change that makes, in this case, it would capture increased property values, increased taxation, and hold it into that zone. We need to know how much the cost is to taxpayers and what the effect is overall. And there used to be in the tiers policy, it's not anymore in your current incentive policy, laid out who would manage this, what board would manage it, and we have no idea who would manage the tiers. And across the board, the problems have been about transparency in the state of Texas. So transparency, transparency, transparency with everyone is, you might be surprised, we might agree with what you propose, right? But we won't know if you don't tell us. Thank you.
So basically, this is a TERS 101 presentation, and
maybe I'll answer questions. We'll see what the questions are. So I think as you pull up that slide deck, I think those were some important comments made earlier, and so that's part of what's built into the TERS process. As you go through creating a preliminary project and finance plan, you have to create a board, you appoint people, you then create a final project and finance plan. So there's lots of approvals along the process, including a public hearing. So I'll go through some of those steps as we go through. You can skip the first slide that just tells you about the firm. We've been doing this a long time, about 25 years. On that second slide, work all over the state, do legislative studies and worked on a lot of TERS throughout this area, whether it's Victoria, whether it's Brownsville, City of Austin, a number of places, Freeport. So what's a TER? So people interchange the terms TERS and TIF. So a TIF is tax increment financing. So you take future revenue called the increment and you allocate it to the zone. So under the tax increment financing statute, you create a tax increment reinvestment zone. Those terms are used interchangeably. Some folks refer to them as their TERS, some refer to them as their TIF. It is not a tax increase. So it's future revenue that you allocate for 20, 25 years, 15 years to the zone. And it has to get spent on items that are in the project and finance plan, that everybody can read the plan and see how the money's going to be spent. So on this graphic, let's just say the zone we're looking at has a base of $10 million. All the tax revenue, all that property tax revenue you're getting off that $10 million continues to flow to the general fund like it does. A portion of anything above the 10 million, all or a portion gets put in a special account. It's called the tax increment fund, and that has to get spent on the zone. So that's what the orange is. And so at the time the TERS ends or terminates in 10, 15, 20, 30 years, it goes away, and then all the money goes back to the city's general fund or the county. Does that make sense? So everything you're getting off that 10 million, you continue to get to the general fund. All or a portion of some of that future revenue for a set number of years, you put in a special account. It then terminates and the money flows to the general fund like the TERS never existed. Right. So all or a portion. So some people do 25%, some people do 50%, some people do 100%. It just depends on the zone, how much the zone is going to grow and what you want to use to pay for out of that zone. So for downtowns, it's pretty common to do 75 to 100% because you have a lot of structures you want to keep. In larger projects, you may do 50%. So a greenfield project, a master plan project, an industrial park, you may do 50%. So the city gets to keep 50%, and then 50% goes into the zone. And so part of the process you work through when you do that preliminary plan is you forecast how much growth is going to occur in the zone, so you can then calibrate how much money the zone's going to need. So that's part of the first step, is to say, how much are things going to grow? So does the TERS make sense, yes or no, based on how things are going to grow? If it does make sense, what % of the increment should we put in? You typically will partner with other taxing jurisdictions like a county, like a community college district. So you bring a number of the taxing entities together. School districts do not participate just due to the school finance. They're allowed to, but it hurts them in the whole Robin Hood funding, so they don't. So there hasn't been a school that's participated in about 25 years. This is a simple example. So you have a number of taxing entities for Rockport. If you remove the ISD, it's about 78 cents. So if you get $1 million worth of new growth in the zone and you put 100% of that in, that's about $7,800 a year. So follow me on that. So if you got $1 million worth of new growth, if you had the city participate, the county has both the county and their road and flood rate plus the NAV district, it's about 78 cents. So off $1 million, you're going to generate $7,800. Okay, so hopefully there's a lot more growth, because if this is all you get, it's probably not worth it. So you need to get a lot more growth to generate that funding to pay for the projects. As I said, this is not a tax increase. Your rate stays the same. It's more of an internal accounting exercise for what account you put that money in. The government creates the TERS. Cities can allocate a portion of their sales tax. You guys are only a 1 cent sales tax because half goes to a hospital district and half goes to the county property tax reduction. So you all collect, I think, 1 cent, don't you? A property tax? I mean, not property tax, but sales tax. I'm sorry, sales tax. So you get 1 cent. You align the benefits and the resources, reduces the need to spend other money. What do people spend TERS money on? You can acquire land, you do public works, public improvements, people do parks, streets, sidewalks, parking. You can demolish buildings, you can do economic development 380 grants. So all the things you're working on in terms of economic development, public infrastructure, public improvements, those are the kinds of things you use TERS funding for. Does that make sense to everybody? So it's those kinds of things. The money goes in the account. You can issue debt against it. So if some TERS get enough money, not all do, you can issue debt and the TERS makes that debt payment. Again, there's no tax increase. So sometimes if it's a really large project, the developer is paying for public infrastructure, and once the project is built, you refinance that debt and the TERS makes that payment for you. If you need to hire engineers or surveyors or relocation costs, all the kind of standard things you're doing, you can do with the TERS. Let me go through a couple of examples. You have what I call the new large master plan projects. If you've been to Irving and Las Colinas, that's a really big TERS, right? There was a bunch of infrastructure going to get built out over time. There's multiple landowners. They have a plan. They have one in Las Colinas. So that's a new large master planned project. Corridor redevelopment. So a great example is in San Antonio, that Broadway corridor. They have a TERS in that area, and they use the TERS to do economic development grants to get a lot of that multifamily residential built. There wasn't a lot of multifamily residential getting built in that part of town. They used the TERS to provide an incentive to those multifamily developers to get those projects to be built. So those two examples, large master plan, corridor redevelopment. I call these site-specific is the third example. It was common with the Cabela's, the Bass Pro. If you've been through New Braunfels where the Buc-ee's is on the east side, on that retail development, they have a TERS there. One owner knew what he was going to do, did it quickly, and they used the TERS to pay for some of that infrastructure near that Buc-ee's in New Braunfels. Downtowns are common. I use downtown Brownsville as an example. Victoria's done one, Canyon's done one. There are lots of these. This is a very common tool to use. Don't always work, and they typically don't work because the growth doesn't occur. So you need to make sure that that growth occurs. If you put a TERS in place, a TERS in and of itself doesn't cause property values to go up. You may not get any money. You've got to get new development to occur. So you typically align the TERS with other activities, whether it's your arts center, economic development funds, grants. Cities that have the 4A, 4B sales tax will often put sales tax money in. So the TERS is just one tool you would use to pay for these projects. I call these the two rules for TERS. The first one says you can't have too much residential in the TERS at the time it's created. Can't have more than 30% be residential, which sometimes impacts downtown areas because downtowns have residential and you're trying to draw those boundaries. The second rule is you can't have too many TERS, and it depends on how big your city is. So rule number one, can't have too much residential at the time created, not in the future, because they're used for master plan communities. And number two says you just can't have too many of these tools. So what's the step to create a TERS? The first thing you have to do, and this is outlined in state law, you have to prepare a preliminary reinvestment zone financing plan. You then have to have a public hearing like you've just had tonight. You hold the public hearing. Some cities can approve it on one reading, some two, some require three. You approve it, the TERS gets approved. What gets approved that night? You approve the boundaries, the number of board members that are going to be on the board, and the percent of that increment that you're contributing, right? Whether it's 50%, 75%. So you're laying out to the public, we're going to do a TERS on City Hall, as an example, for 20 years, and we're going to contribute 65%. Then you do number 5, which is prepare the final project and financing plan. So within that project plan, that's where you lay out what you can spend the money on, or say what you can't spend the money on. That gets approved by the TERS board, and that plan comes back to the city council, and you all have to approve that plan. Once that plan's approved, you can start spending money on projects. As part of this process, you're typically talking to other taxing entities, trying to get them to join as well. So state law, if it's created by the city, minimum of 5, maximum of 15. But if an entity joins, they're guaranteed at least 1 seat. So you may take the first 5, and then everybody that joins gets a seat or 2. You got to have an odd number just so it works with the voting. So it's not a hard and fast rule. So that's why it's good to have those conversations early to see who's willing to get on board and what they're willing to do in terms of a percent increment. Another thing to think about is if you buy up a lot of land, if the public buys up a lot of land, your tax base goes down and then there is no increment. So let me walk you through just how this might work. If you create a TERS this year, anytime this year, the base value is whatever it is in 2023. If the public buys up property, the taxable value goes down and there is no increment. If you sell land or redevelop land you own, it hits the tax rolls and then it really goes up. And then private land just goes up and down. So let's say we created the TERS in 2023. The first year of increment is what's on the tax roll in 24. It's the difference between 24 and 23. 24 taxes aren't due until January 31st of 25. right? So this does take time to build up. So I always say to communities, if this is a tool you want to use or you think you're interested in, you just kind of have to put it in place to kind of catch up with with the way the calendar works. So this won't generate money overnight. It'll take a year, 2, 3 years as projects get developed and come on board. You hired Gateway Planning Group. They did a downtown study. I pulled this from the comprehensive plan that y'all did a year or two ago. I don't remember. I was skimming that last night, coming back from Brownsville, in part talking about a downtown tourist they're going to use for that riverfront in downtown Brownsville. This is your downtown heritage district. This is the kind of area it might make sense to put a tourist in place. But again, you've got to have enough new development, right? The old HEB site, older properties have to transition, and you have to get enough new taxable value to get built to generate enough money to pay for projects. So you could include the park. You don't have to include the park. That has a zero taxable value. It'll always have a zero taxable value. Sometimes cities will include parks because they want to use tourist money to pay for park improvements, as an example, or hike and bike trails. So, you know, if you were looking at an area that might make sense, this is a district that you've already designated. You obviously have a lot going on with arts and culture. You'd have to look at, I don't know what y'all do in terms of fixing up an old building if you get a property tax abatement or an exemption. That also plays into it. So in some communities, if you're a historic building that gets fixed up, you become tax exempt. So those are the kinds of things you just have to think about when you're going through that preliminary plan to make sure there's enough there that justifies doing this. And that's where you spend a lot of time. I'll come back to this, to the process slide. That's where you spend a lot of time, or at least I say half the time, is on that step number 1. Is this just worth pursuing? And sometimes you get to that point and you just say no. There's just, you know, do something else, or, you know, we don't think there's going to be enough new development to go through it. But the city would create it. You all would, I'd say, run it. You create the board. The board has to have standard meetings. You have to have a public notice. It has to be in a public forum. Somebody takes notes. Board members have 2-year terms. Kind of the standard stuff that you're already doing. You can appoint people from city council, chambers, EDCs, property owners to be on the board. I typically say don't appoint someone who's probably going to come ask the tourist for money. So if there's a large landowner that's going to try to work a deal with the tourist, they probably shouldn't sit on the board just for a conflict of interest. But it's usually people who care about the area, they know the area, and they know the kinds of projects that'll make sense. So with that, I probably went longer than I was supposed to, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about this or anything else you want to talk about.
Comments?
This is all out of tax code chapter 311, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
The tiers, as was brought up in the comp plan discussions, if, you know, in our downtown area, it's pretty much, it's a lot of art center shops and stuff like that. Does it artificially raise property values or could drive up the rents if there's an increase in property values there?
I mean, no different than any other improvement you would make. I mean, so if you go fix up sidewalks, you put in better parking, those properties become more valuable, and in turn, the rents could go up. I mean, if you create more activity in a tourist based on any kind of public improvement, rents will fluctuate. But a tourist in and of itself doesn't necessarily do that. You could also use the tourist to do facade grants, as an example, sidewalk improvements, but no. I mean, if Rockport just starts, continues to grow and it just starts booming, rents just kind of go up and down like any other community. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Anything else, Council? Thank you, Mr. James.
You're
That was a great presentation tonight.
Thank you.
We're going to go to agenda item number 15, deliberate and act on approval of request for qualifications for city attorney services. We also have Mrs. Rutledge, if she wants to come up and speak on agenda item number 15.
Thank you again, Mayor Pro Tem, for allowing me to speak on this agenda item. This agenda item is to deliberate and act on approval of requests for qualifications for city attorney services. My concern is a couple of things. One, there's nothing in the agenda packet or on the city manager's notes, so we don't really know why this is happening. I thought we had a city attorney firm that, you know, was used during the Charter Review Commission. I would encourage the city council to get your own attorney, staff attorney, someone who would have the best interest of the citizens of Rockport that lives locally on staff. I think that'd be a lot less expensive than hiring out contract firms. I think we're probably spending quite a bit more money on these contract firms that have to travel here than we would if we had one on staff. And one that was accountable to everyone. That would be great. I think that worked really well in the past. And so I'd like to see that be something that you all discuss. I know this one is for contract, not for someone that's an employee. But I think there'd be a cost savings to all of us, and also just a benefit all the way around. I've been disappointed with the attorney that we had, so I don't know why this agenda item is here. If it's because that person or that firm is no longer available to us. But I have been quite disappointed because I attended all the Charter Review Commission meetings, and I would think that that attorney is the one that advised for you all to go to Bastrop. And some of the changes have been made for the charter amendment election, where those were made without discussion in a public meeting here in Rockport. So I'm very concerned about that. I would say that you all should disapprove of that attorney if that one comes forward. Thank you.
You actually had asked me to put together an RFP for a new attorney, or a resubmittal of the existing one if they so chose. So that's what you have in front of you. That was in your packet. Additionally, I laid on the dais the response from our current attorney to the news that we were putting out an RFP. So they effectively are no longer our attorney right now. And if y'all approve of this RFP, I'll put it out on TML. You know, I think we all agree that we'd love to have an in-house attorney, but we can't afford it at this point. But so this is our next best option, and we'll go shop and see who's out there.
Questions, comments from council?
I have one. I know that we discussed about the attorney we finally hire having in-house time. Did I not see that in the RFP?
I
or?
put it in the RFP that they would have to spend a certain number of days in Rockport.
But you didn't put a specific.
I think I said they need to include it in their proposal, how much time they can spend in Rockport on the ground.
All right, thank you very much. That was unclear, so thank you.
City attorney is appointed by council, just to clarify that is your representation, so.
And we can put the number we would like to require in their contract.
Absolutely.
There, so
the
that goes on the
process will
details.
go, I'm sorry, let me just, the process will go, we'll put this RFP out, we'll put it on TML, we'll put it on our website. However many attorneys want to send in, we'll send in a proposal that fulfills this requirement. The 5 of you will each get a packet. You can go through, you're going to need to come to consensus on who you would like to talk to, or you can talk to everybody, and then you weed them out from there. Who meets the qualifications is where we start. If you meet the qualifications, you go forward, then you guys weed them out and you pick an attorney.
So basically the same process as when we got you.
Maybe,
Absolutely.
maybe a little bit
You're not going to
quicker.
come out as good though. No, I'm teasing. Yes, that's exactly what we'll do.
Okay. Anything else you guys want to say?
In that, reading through the RFP, and Danielle's a whole lot better at reading these than I am, but can we still can we word it to where we do have an in-house? Maybe not a staff attorney, but one just as many days as we want? I mean, that's part of the process when we get there, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
if you tell them you want, okay, fine, we want you here
5 days
5 days a
yeah.
week, they can say yes or no. We can't accommodate that, or we can.
Okay.
I can tell you, you're not going to get a contract attorney that will be here 5 days a week. But you're also, if you get someone here that's that's in town one day a month. You're not gonna be billed for 8 hours because they will work on Rockport stuff when they have it, and they will work on other stuff that they are billing other entities for if they don't have Rockport items. So you're not gonna pay for someone to sit in an office for 8 hours just to be available to you. You will pay for the time that you use hourly as you normally would.
Other than TML, where else we gonna post this?
TML's the most common.
Okay.
You know, that reaches out to the Municipal Lawyers Association and things like that. So, I mean, I can dig around if you wanna post it some other places.
Well, I mean, if there's local attorneys,
They'll
and
have
they're
some-
municipal attorneys, then they'll have that, they'll see that.
We can send it directly to anybody we want to as well. It'll be on the city website, yep.
Okay.
So if there's someone local, we can solicit whoever we'd like to submit, and they can choose to or not to. So.
Any kind of cost savings, you know, because we were
Absolutely.
previously paying for travel time and
Well,
all
and
that.
I also put it in here so that travel time can be negotiated, because when you look and you pay full price for an attorney to drive here, I don't think that that's acceptable. So travel time needs to be negotiated, to a reasonable rate, in my opinion. I mean, you may feel differently, it's not my attorney, but,
Travel rate, it seems to me that would depend on where they're starting from.
well, I think there's a state established travel rate. Now, if you wanna sit on the phone with us for however much time you're driving down here and bill us because you're actually working for us, that's a lot different than just sitting mindless listening to your radio and charging us full lawyer rate. In my opinion, it's all my opinion, it's worth what you pay for it.
No, same thing. I mean, if the attorney, if we hire somebody from Amarillo, I don't want to pay their travel time, you know,
Well-
versus somebody from Corpus or, you know, whatever.
However, if you get someone from Amarillo that can hop on a Southwest flight and be here more quickly than someone from Dallas, or more efficiently, and you pay the plane ticket versus the full attorney rate, it might be worth it. Doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
but everything needs to be weighed into the equation when you go to make your choice. And it's gonna be very important that you interview that person and you have a very clear understanding of how and when and why you will be charged.
Okay.
An attorney that sends us someone new every week and charges us to confer with whoever the new person is, that's not acceptable. We need to know whose butt's gonna be in the seat, and they need to know what's going on. We don't have to pay for you to bring people up to speed. You can, if you want to.
Yeah.
I think that's the benefit of the proposal process is we can accept or not accept anything that we get. So once we receive them, if they're not as responsive to what's in the RFP as we would like them to be, we can throw it out and start all over. Vanessa, to clarify one quick thing, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but this is separate from special counsel. So if we have the need for whatever circumstance to bring on additional special counsel, we could do that. And for me, the value of this process and seeking those attorneys that do this kind of work is a lot of these firms are going to come with a lot of depth within their organization and have municipal experience. I would love to see a local attorney. I think it's great if we've got them. We've got a lot of amazing folks that have retired here or relocated here. We don't know what's out there until we ask. But as a general statement, I think we're going to be, I mean, for me, I'm going to be looking for a firm that has the depth, that can be able to provide the experience and the level of services that we need, in addition to the person that's going to be here.
Right, you bring up a really good point about the special counsel. Even though our current attorney has submitted his resignation, we are still retaining 2 people from that firm. One who's doing the GLO and Concho Street drainage, and one who is doing the, nobody's in here that knows, the demolition.
Building Standards Commission.
Yeah, he's helping us with the Building Standards Commission issue. So we'll retain those 2 from that firm until those projects are complete. But just the official city attorney portion, right now you effectively do not have a city attorney, so, we'll farm out work until we get one.
Okay, so we're covered. We
Absolutely, I would never leave you uncovered.
okay.
Anything else, council? Okay, this is just a deliberation. Is there an act? We have to make a motion on this one?
Do you need a motion on that?
It says
No, I
act.
don't need anything. Oh, wait, yes,
It's
I
an
do.
act, yeah.
Okay,
You have
make
to
a
approve
motion.
the RFP.
I move to approve item 15 as presented.
Second.
Ward 1,
Aye.
Ward 2,
Aye.
Ward 3,
Aye.
Ward 4, aye. Okay, agenda item number 16, Mrs. Stronger again, projects.
I put a sheet on the dais. The top portion is kind of still in the works, in draft form, so you can see kind of the projects we're working on. Thing that I thought was important to put in front of you tonight was the bottom portion. That's all the developments that are on the books right now. So you can see how many things we have coming in. I will break that data down further into units, types, location, and things like that. But that's where we're headed. If y'all are interested in that, I'll flesh that entire report out. If you're not, I'll scrap it and we'll do something different.
Okay.
I like this. I would just like to know where these things are.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, it's a great list. We got a lot going on, but
Right. I just am not gonna pour more hours into it if you guys don't want it. If you guys want it, I'll flesh it out. It'll be more information than y'all ever cared to have.
I like it.
That's it.
I
I
always
agree
like
with Councilman
information.
Jackson. As we take this forward, I've been trying to drill in and figure out exactly which projects are in my ward specifically, so I get a little bit smarter about them, especially with the new development stuff. So I think there's value here and would definitely like additional build out on this.
So we've also got a guy that's working on, building us a GIS system, and I think it'll be great at some point to have these located on GIS. Y'all will have a dashboard, you can drill down and find the whole info, but I don't know if Mike's gonna share him that much. So I've got a dream. We gotta make it happen.
well, Mike's not known for sharing.
No.
He's not known for
No.
sharing.
Mhm.
I'll pursue it another avenue.
Okay, well, I think we all agree we like it. Thank you for doing this for us. More information is always better. So,
If y'all have any questions on anything on there?
any questions?
Cool.
We're gonna go to reports from council, agenda item number 17. We'll start with Katie, Ward 1. Jackson?
I got nothing right now.
Second meeting in a row. Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay. Mrs. Hale?
I had the opportunity to attend the Maritime Museum Gala this past Saturday. It was a phenomenal event and a lot to be proud of downtown. I know it's in your area, but I snuck in for the evening. But I think that the board that was there and the staff did a phenomenal job. The attendance was really good. The artwork, the exhibits were phenomenal. And there's a lot of exciting new projects and improvements to the facility that are coming, and money that's needed. So I look forward to hearing more from that team as they continue to progress that really amazing facility that we have downtown. Other than that, looking forward to Oyster Fest. So neutral territory in the town of Fulton. So hopefully everybody will come out and support the Fulton Fire Department and all the nonprofits that'll be out there.
Mr. Brundett, Ward 3?
Had the opportunity, along with some other members of council and staff, to attend the Clean Coast Texas called kickoff meeting last week. I feel like it was very productive. Some good things are coming out of it. Hope to see some actual traction being made. But it seemed like all the local entities, governmental entities, were on board with something moving forward. We don't know what it is yet, but we're going to move forward with something, hopefully. So anyway, it was just good to see everybody in the room finally agreeing on some things. So it was good. It was really good. Oyster Fest, yes, neutral ground. Everybody be safe, be happy, and don't visit Chief if you don't have to. Or John Harrell. or the Fulton Chief. I believe that's all I have.
I also attended the Texas Clean Coast and got a lot of information out of there. The biggest interest to me was going to be Chili Creek and how we are able to redirect some of that flow into Aransas Bay instead of Little Bay. Not promise anything, but there might be ways that we are able to do that by working with Texas Clean Coast, and that's, a lot of it's in my ward, so it was very interesting to hear about that. I also attended the stormwater drainage meeting, and that was my first time, and I got a lot of information. Again, it's just really nice to see all the entities coming together and coming with consensus and working on projects that will help the whole community, not just one side or the other. So that was a lot of good meetings to go to. I believe that's it. The drainage pipe is that still going well in the drainage pipe?
Which one?
Mine?
You're, yes, yours is going fine.
Okay.
No, the project is still moving along. We did have a little hiccup with TCEQ on a discharge that was not properly done, and that's been addressed and taken care of. So we're pumping back into one of the ponds and taking the sediment out. So we cleared that up, and we talked to the engineer today. He's going to have a talk with the contractor to ensure we're still on time schedule to finish the project. So
Okay.
it is moving along.
Thank you. All right. Well, that's it tonight. I get a motion to adjourn. Oh, wait. Oh, whooping crane strut.
This
Okay.
weekend.
Give the details on it. Do you have
I'm
it?
sorry, you gonna win?
Oh, well, I don't know. I'm gonna try.
What day is it?
Saturday.
Yep, Saturday, 8
It's 8 a.m.
8 a.m. at the beach.
Anything else?
Motion adjourned.
All right. We are, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to say now? Motion adjourned. Meeting is called at, what time is it? 7:53. Thank you, everyone.
Good job.
Good job, man. Totally forgot the last most important thing.